everybody. Welcome again to MOOC Indonesia 101. Now we are going to start Unit 6, which is about the dynamics of Indonesian politics. Indonesia has been undergoing interesting political dynamics, and there have been a number of regimes since Soekarno period. And in this unit, we are going to discuss about the dynamics of Indonesian politics during Soekarno's presidency. Okay, so since its conception or beginning on August 17, 1950, Indonesia under Soekarno presidency applied liberal political system known as the parliamentary democracy. This is the period of liberal democracy in Indonesian history. This was also the date when the Republic of the United States of Indonesia, or RIS, was dissolved. The federal system was then replaced by the Unitary Republic of Indonesia. Okay. The period of liberal democracy was marked by the growth of political parties and the enactments of the parliamentary system. It was the first time in the country's history when free and fair elections were held. However, the application of the liberal democracy was challenged by the political instability and the divisive political situation at that time. Soekarno then replaced the liberal system with a political system that was based on traditional village system, based on discussion and consensus, guided by the elders. The system was called guided democracy or democracy terpimpin. This was proclaimed in 1959 and ended in 1965. The first phase of Soekarno's presidency was characterized by the embrace of change and the mentality of struggle for the sake of a better future. It took a great level of courage and risk-taking attitudes to undertake the physical struggle for liberation from external oppression and the formation of a sovereign nation. Escalating nationalist consciousness, which was partly triggered by the repressive and militaristic nature of the Japanese administration, later grew into more radical and revolutionary movements during the War of Independence and the ongoing struggle against neo-colonial domination. The second significant characteristic of the period has to do with the opposing tendency, the assertion of conservative values associated with plural communalistic societies. These include elevating the virtue of the family system in which elders must be respected, self-sacrifice for the benefit of family, also meaning the nation as a big family, and increased exaltation of the so-called Budaya Ketimuran or Eastern culture as opposed to Budaya Barat or Western culture. The seeds of nationalism grew into more radical movements during the Japanese occupation. Although early organized nationalist movements emerged at the turn of the 20th century with the formation of Budi Utomo and Sarekat Islam, nationalist consciousness escalated after the coming of the Japanese. Initially, the Japanese were welcomed by Indonesians enthusiastically. The permission by the Japanese to display the red and white flag, as well as upward social mobility of many Indonesians after they had been given opportunities for employment in administrative positions formerly dominated by the Dutch, Eurasians, and Christian Indonesians, were some of the major reasons for this support. However, as the Japanese began to exercise harsher control over the population, this warm welcome turned into antipathy. Kahin maintains that the more direct rule of the Japanese administration, in comparison to more moderate and indirect characteristics of Dutch rule, raised a collective feeling of subordination and humiliation among many Indonesians. Revolutionary enthusiasm was fostered as a political device to gather the emotional support needed to maintain the president's power. According to Benedict Anderson, Soekarno's revolutionary style was a practical method of dealing with post-independence problems. But many perceive it as no longer relevant to the challenges that confronted Indonesia after independence. Soekarno's political formulations, such as the concept of demokrasi terpimpin or guided democracy, NASACOM, which is an acronym of nationalism, agama, and communism, or nationalism, religion, and communism, and Manipol Ustek, which is the acronym for Manifesto Politik, Undang-Undang Dasar 1945, Sosialisme, Demokrasi Terpimpin, Ekonomi Terpimpin, Kepribadian Indonesia, or the Political Manifesto, the 1945 Constitution, Socialism, Guided Democracy, Guided Economy, and Indonesian Identity proved to be political rhetoric unable to cure the ailing Indonesian economy. Soekarno's political innovations that combine substantially different concepts, such as religion and communism, appeared to be radical. However, they were skillfully created as political maneuvers designed to bolster the president's own role. For instance, when the influence of communism were strong, Soekarno showed sympathy to the movement. This resulted in growing support from Russia and China. Nevertheless, in order to limit their influence in his administration, he did not include communist personnel in his cabinet. Considering the absence of substantial and radical socio-political changes, it is reasonable to say that the overall direction of social policy during the period was conservative. The autocratic nature of government administration in the archipelago, from Dutch rule until the end of the Soekarno period, remained powerful. Meanwhile, the essential modern values, such as efficiency, a future-oriented outlook, and the belief in individual capacity, had not been widely promoted by the government and adopted by the masses. At the same time, rural communal values were strengthened and officially adopted as the basis of the government. The tendency to preserve order, be guided, and maintain socio-cultural harmony was more influential and prevalent than revolutionary zeal. This argument is also raised by Benedict Anderson in his study of the 1945 Indonesian Revolution in Java. Anderson maintained that the priority to the recognition of Indonesian sovereignty led the revolutionary leaders to adopt conservative domestic policies which hindered the realization of far-reaching social changes. Besides the influential role of the educated priai or the aristocratic upper class in Indonesia in social and cultural changes of the time, other examples which affirm the conservative tendency are strengthening of more deterministic national identity and the exaltation of the virtues of the family system. During the Japanese occupation, national identity was promoted by the Japanese as this was beneficial in their effort to mobilize support against the Allies. The valorization of national identity also incorporated anti-Western sentiment. This was in tune with the Japanese attempts to construct themselves as the light of Asia, quote unquote, a claim that was supported by their national sovereignty and technological superiority. A claim that was in an era when most countries in Asia were still under European and American rule, that was promising. Disseminating the notion that Indonesians and the Japanese shared a common Eastern identity and bond was thus a strategy to promote a sense of solidarity and a common destiny between two Asian people. Okay, and then the construction of collective identity is also an effective means of mobilizing support for the central power. Therefore, it reduced political frictions. Under Sukarno's presidency, the national identity that was promoted during the Japanese occupation was strengthened to such an extent that it became closer to an essentialist ideology or an essentialist identity. Guided democracy is a good example of the construction of this essentialist identity. Arguing that Western democracy was not compatible with cultural values of Indonesians, Sukarno promoted a form of democracy which was rooted in Indonesian indigenous values, namely musyawarah, which is mutual discussion, mufakat, or unanimous agreement, and gotong royong, or mutual cooperation. Combined with the tenets of the state's ideological basis, Pancasila, these communalistic ideas became an all-embracing system of government and set of national values. Okay, that's the end of Unit 6. So I hope that after watching the video, you will be understanding more about the ways some nationalist and indigenous values have been used maybe by the political leaders in order to maintain their domination in the state. Okay, thank you, and we see again in Unit 7. Bye.